This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Sony a7S II. Now, I wish we had time for even more camera reviews. It is my hobby. It is my love. And this one's been out for a couple of months. So instead of doing the usual excruciating detail-oriented review, I'm going to cover a couple of points about why I would or when I would want to use this photography and when I wouldn't, say, compared to something like the higher resolution a7S II or the a7R II, that sort of thing. And also we're going to talk about video because primarily that's this mirrorless camera's job in life, to be an excellent video camera because it is lower resolution, it has larger pixel sensor sites. It is a phenomenal low light and video camera. And being the second generation model, we'll talk about some differences between the first and the second generation also. Now our camera is a loaner from lumoid.com. I don't know if you've heard of them yet. They're like Borrow Lens, only they do more than just cameras and lenses. And they actually approached us and said, hey, we'll send you one of these and lenses if you want. So this lovely Sony FE 70 to 200 millimeters, courtesy of them as well. Now, what they do is they loan out by the day, by the week, however you want to do it. The longer you rent, the cheaper that it gets. They typically work out to be a little bit less than Borrow Lens. And also they're a handy place to check too, because sometimes Borrow Lens has a long waiting list for the hot new items. Plus, they also have fitness gear too, so you can try 3 different fitness bands, see which one is the one you want, and then you can buy it from them if you want, or you can buy it from the store. Likewise, they also do drones. Imagine that. So you can have some fun with drones, because most of us don't need that kind of thing all the time, do we? Also, home audio equipment. So they're pretty easy to work with. They work like Borrow Lens. You order it online, and they ship it to you via FedEx. You get a return label. You get the idea. Pretty nice setup. Working out well for us. The gear came in immaculate condition, came with an SD card, the strap, the charger, all that sort of thing. Not bad. That's lumoid.com. So it stayed the same 12.2 megapixel EXMOR sensor with a BIONZ X image processor. You're not going to see an improvement, particularly from last generation on that. Insanely high max ISO. You can get great footage at ISO 6400. Honestly, the native ISO is 100 to 102,400. There's an expanded ISO range that takes up to 409,600. Now, granted, you probably won't want to shoot at that, but this is a camera that sees as well as you do in the dark, if not better. Honestly, you'll see a couple of sample photos that were taken in dark rooms, again, on a stormy day with no lighting whatsoever. And there's a whole heck of a lot of color and detail going on there. Just a great camera if you do a lot of nighttime work or dimly lit scenes, whether it's photography or it's video. Now, that resolution isn't going to be, the bee's knees if you're doing landscape photography. If you're doing anything, you need a whole lot of high resolution detail. If you're shooting for billboards, that sort of thing. Though, keep in mind, 5 years ago, people were using lower resolution cameras and blowing things up to billboard size just fine. But still, me personally, I would love to have the Sony a7R II or even the a7 II if I was just doing mainly photography. All Sony a7 cameras are full-frame mirrorless cameras. This one just happens to be the one that's geared towards video production. It has clean HDMI out, a microphone jack, a headphone jack, and we have internal 4K video recording. Finally, that's new for the second generation model. They've added S-Log 3 in addition to S-Log 2. And there's a Gamma assistant as well to help you with that. We have the in-body image stabilization system, IBIS, 5-axis. It's really a very interesting system, and it's also very effective. You've got a high-resolution OLED electronic viewfinder here, and they say they've reduced rolling shutter, and in fact, that's the jello effect. I do see less of it with this one, but we're still not completely free of that yet. And for those of you who really hate that red record button where it's located, you can now assign another button to be the record button. Contrast, focus is also improved autofocus speed. Now, the a7S family was always the good one or the best one among them when it came to that, but you got 169 autofocus points. Last gen had 25, and there are 25 of those are contrast detection, and there are 9 essential AF points. This thing is wickedly good at focusing, which is particularly important for video. You don't want to see the camera hunting if you're actually shooting using autofocus instead of pulling focus yourself. So physically, we have the first generation A7 here. It's not the a7S, but that's okay. They share pretty much the same bodies. This is our second generation A7 S2. And you can see how the body has changed from generation to generation. Now, most people, particularly those with larger hands, have liked that change. It's a little heavier, it's a little bit bulkier, but it gives you a grip to, well, literally grip onto it. You can see how shallow this is here compared to this. Also, they moved the shutter button over here, which most people prefer. That's pretty much, well, traditionally where shutter buttons have been. With the previous generation, it was back here on the body. It took some getting used to. Those are the big changes physically. And then the build is also more robust. You've got an all aluminum frame over here too. And the added space is needed inside for the 5-axis in-body stabilization, which is kind of like a really complex and neat stabilization system that just floats the entire sensor inside of the camera. Also, another important point, though, the A7 didn't have this problem as much as the A6000 series of cameras, but the bigger body also allows for bigger heat sinks inside. Notice it says 4K. We can now shoot 4K video internally. That means not out to an external recorder, and that does generate heat. So we've got enough mass here to actually offset that problem, and haven't had any problems shooting 4K clips. Now, typically, we don't do clips longer than about 5 minutes at a shot, so keep that in mind. But so far, people have not had problems with their A7S II. This is not the A6000 or even the original A7, which could get kind of toasty if you went for a long time with its maximum of 1080p. Now, typical of the A7 family, the card door is on the side, so you don't have to take it off of a tripod to access it, and it's still a single card slot. Those of you who want redundant card slots for backup of your footage, sorry, you're out of luck. SD and Sony's own memory sticks are supported here. And the battery is in the compartment on the bottom right there. Now, new for this is you can charge the camera via USB. You don't have to take the battery out and put it in the charger separately, so that can be certainly handy to do. But typical of Sony A7 family cameras, battery life is not a strong point. You're probably going to want to buy some spare batteries and keep them around nice and charged up, especially if you're going out for an important job where you're going to be shooting hundreds of photos. You're going to want to have a spare battery or two available. Now, I love mirrorless cameras. The advantages are many. The small body size, the fact that you're actually getting a live view from the viewfinder. Video, the focus is just so fast and so fluid compared to using a regular conventional digital SLR. In fact, I've sold my Canon EOS 6D a while ago. I'm using a Sony A7. We use a Sony A6000 for our video. And I also have a Fuji X-T10. So I love mirrorless. A lot to enjoy about it. One thing that's kind of comical, though, as we cry for better lenses, lower aperture lenses, that sort of thing, the lenses get really huge compared to the body. So here it is with the FE 70-200G. It's an f4 lens, not even an f2.8. My God, I can't imagine how big it would be on this body. And the lens outweighs the camera, I swear. And of course, it has a tripod stand for that very reason. So it becomes very unbalanced and ungainly. So those of you who are thinking about buying one of these, say for sports, and low light sports photography, there's a reason for that. And this is very fast with the new autofocus system to focus too. But you're going to be handling something that is kind of, well, unbalanced. So this is our shooting studio, in case you're wondering what it looks like. Obviously, we have natural light coming in here. There's an overhead light, your average overhead light, and these very serious studio lights here, lots of equivalent wattage going on. So for the video clips that we're going to show you, which is what we used for an actual smackdown that we did between two laptops, it was dark as night out there. It was Texas thunderstorm season going on. And normally we'd have to use the studio lights, and even then things would look not as bright as we'd like using our Sony A6000. Now, even using our A7, which is a full frame, so it lets more light in, you would see a little less sharpness than normal. It wasn't ideal. So we whipped out the A7S Mark II, and we did our smackdown right on this table with two laptops on the gray top, no white card or anything like that, without these lights even being on, just the overhead light. And believe me, there was like no natural light barely coming in. So now that you've heard that, you'll see what the footage looks like, and it's pretty darn impressive considering that. And by the way, right now our camera person is hand holding the camera to show the in-body 5-axis image stabilization as well. So if you see a little bit of movement, that's why it's not on a tripod as we would normally do, but then again, it's also pretty impressive. And in case you want to see our assistant, who's here for every video too, here's Gupta right here, our attack cat. And here's that video we shot. This is 1080p recording, not 4K recording, and this is at ISO 1000 f4 using the 24 to 70 millimeter lens. And because the internet loves cats, that's what we're capturing here at night. Now, this first shot was taken indoors under incandescent lighting. Yes, we still have some of those old-fashioned filament light bulbs. That gives a yellow cast. These are raw files that I've minimally corrected, so I've left the color cast in. But that was very, very good-looking shot considering how high the ISO was. And here's another one with a little bit of window lighting on a very cloudy day. And you'll see the information for the shot with the next tighter shot that I took of the cat. So we've established that it's great in low light. We've got a lot of detail. We have a lot of color. We have a lot of sharpness. The autofocus was spot on. Doing iFocus there, I didn't have to manually correct it. So how about daylight? Yes, it can do daylight too. And here's an example. Sometimes the dynamic range gets a little out of hand. We've got a little bit of overexposure of the highlights here, but all in all, it's a very competent camera and quite good outdoors as well, as long as you're okay with that 12.2 megapixel resolution. So that's the Sony a7S II. Good God, yes, it's expensive. But then again, there are a lot more expensive serious video cameras out there. Canon cinema cameras, for example, RED cameras. And given the price, honestly, there's not a lot of stuff that you're either usually looking at like $1,000 to $2,000 or you're going over $10,000. In this $3,000 or $3,100 price range, it is a superb camera. I mean, you can do some pretty professional work with this for all around kind of cinematography if you want. Obviously, even for the kind of work we do here, it's somewhat overkill in the studio environment. We don't need that sort of low light prowess. But for those of you who are shooting videos at weddings, oh my God, you know, they're often not very well lit. This can be a lifesaver, especially with the in-body stabilization. Likewise for low light photography as well, if you're doing concert photos, that sort of thing. You get the idea. Now, if you just want the sharpest possible camera and you're doing landscape photography where resolution counts and minute detail, you want to see the bark on the tree, that sort of thing, this probably wouldn't be your camera.